The president is scrambling to get a hold of the midterm elections. The road to keeping control of the House is all but closed, and keeping control of the Senate isn't looking like a Sunday drive either. So he's breaking out the big gun, himself. His move to win in the fall is more Trump. That means instead of spending his massive campaign bank account on close races, he's going to run ads about himself. And if that doesn't work, the administration looks like it's getting ready for Trump to declare a national emergency around the election. We'll get into both things today because it's a lot. It's Thursday, August 27th, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense with Grant Hermes. I'm Grant Hermes. This week, Trump has been riding kind of high when it comes to the elections. Out of the 260 endorsements he gave out in the primaries, just 9 of those people lost. Now, it's worth pointing out, like the New York Times did, that most of those picks were politicians running for re-election who we call incumbents, who tend to be safe bets, often running without a serious challenger or a challenger at all in a lot of cases. In the picks that weren't incumbents, Trump still had a success rate of 87%, which is pretty darn good. He also picked up a win in a runoff primary for governor in Oklahoma in a guy named Mike Mazzei, a pretty uncharismatic state politician who had backed an unpopular industrial plant that Trump wanted. But because of Trump's endorsement, he won against that state's sitting attorney general, who had much deeper pockets. And then there was the big one, the South Carolina primary runoff race for Senate, where Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham, won thanks to Trump going to South Carolina and then finally cracking open his $400 million MAGA Inc. bank account to spend $800,000 on that race. It needs to be said that it is weird for a sitting president to be this involved in a primary runoff race, let alone spending nearly $1 million in the final week and then going to campaign. This is a race for a race for a race. But both the Oklahoma and South Carolina races are again proof of just how much power Trump holds over the base of his party, so he's a little high in his own supply right now. Which might be why this week, White House insiders started leaking what Trump's plans are for the rest of the midterm elections, make them about him. Apart from the money he spent in South Carolina last week, Trump hasn't touched the $400 million in his Political Action Committee, that's MAGA Inc. According to sources who spoke to The Atlantic, during a meeting earlier this month, Trump said that instead of doling out that money to vulnerable campaigns or backing candidates in tight races, he wants to use it to make ads about his accomplishments as president. According to The Atlantic, Trump wanted what one person described as environmental lift ads, commercials that would focus on nationalizing the midterms broadly around his victories, and he suggested that the ad makers mine his own on-camera statements as building blocks. And when Trump was talking about this, apparently said, "Go look at the clips, I cite accomplishments all the time," which I guess is true, but also just because you say something is an accomplishment doesn't mean it's real. I mean, he's claimed the war in Iran has been won 4 dozen times, that the job market is booming, and that he single-handedly brought down crime, none of which are true. So, I'm not sure we can trust the White House definition of accomplishment. But it's also going to be really, really hard to sell that, and something that not a lot of Republican strategists are excited about, because the president is not a popular guy. A new poll out from Strength in Numbers and Verisight found that the president is below 50% support on every single issue. That includes the most important issue to all voters, which is prices and inflation. His net approval rating on that is a negative 48. His net approval on jobs and the economy is negative 42. But even on his strongest issues, he's in the negatives by double digits. That's immigration, deportation, public safety, and for the first time in a long time, he is underwater on border security. And on top of that, like I said on Tuesday's show, his personal approval rating is at 33%, a record low. The war in Iran tonight at midnight hits the 6-month mark after the deadline for the peace deal to end all peace deals came and went, and now we're in a trade war with Canada. Instead of trying to end it before Labor Day, the president is renaming Lake Ontario Lake America, which he did today by executive order. And really quickly, this isn't as important, but First, the lake came before the Canadian province, and it was named for the Iroquois word shining waters, but I get how someone who makes a living slapping his name on things and shouting, "I own this," could make that mistake. Also, couldn't we have come up with a better name for this? I mean, we already did this with the Gulf of Mexico. Why have bodies of water with the same name? There are a ton of things we could have called this. Lake Liberty, Lake Washington, those are free, those are obvious. But Lake America? That's lazy. It's forcing the United States to wear a hat that matches its shoes because we can't color coordinate properly. But really, for me, changing this name is going to mess up the final verse of Gordon Lightfoot's 1976 banger, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and I, for one, won't stand for that. Moving on, though, Trump's plan to put himself at the center of the midterms when he is deeply unpopular and his policies are even worse makes the midterms a referendum on him, but he's also already looking for other people to blame when it goes wrong. This week, he promoted a list of grievances sent out by a right-wing influencer named Matt Van Swol that, I kid you not, starts by saying, "I don't think the GOP fully grasps how badly they are fucking up right now," before going down a very, very long list of reasons on how the party isn't doing enough on things like mass deportations, keeping their Doge promises, or just not generally being loyal enough to Trump. He wants more of those things, which is wild. I talked about last week that the Republican Party tracks loyalty to the president down to the 100th decimal place. How that works, I honestly don't really know. But Trump just blocked a sitting member of Congress from being a Senate candidate in South Carolina who had a loyalty score of 95.33% because apparently that's not loyal enough. Nonetheless, CNN is reporting that the president is getting ready to scapegoat Republicans should they lose, which is very likely. Here's how Trump talked about this in a recent interview with Punchbowl News.
The question is, will they vote? Because a lot of them are very angry at Republicans, to be honest with you.
Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, they're angry at Republicans, but they're not angry at me.
That's an interesting thing. Why?
They're not angry at me, but they are angry at Republicans.
Everyone's always...
So Trump is sort of right and sort of wrong there. A poll from YouGov out just 10 days ago looked at divisions inside the Republican Party and among Republicans who call themselves MAGA. Trump's approval is at 90%. These would be the numbers that Natalie Harp is printing out for the president. Among non-MAGA Republicans, his approval rating is 20%. It is also worth pointing out, though, that around 60% of the Republican Party considers themselves to be MAGA supporters, though the question changed last year from do you consider yourself a MAGA Republican to are you a MAGA supporter, which I would argue are different questions, but the numbers are the numbers on this. And they say an awful lot of Republicans still believe in the Trump vision for the country, if not Trump himself, which does make it kind of hard to understand the other numbers I talked about then, that overall Trump is wildly unpopular as president and on the issues, and you don't get that unpopular with just Democrat and independent opposition alone. And that still means that this strategy of making Trump the face of the midterms for Republicans is a really risky strategy. Okay, when we come back, the other risky strategy the White House is setting up as their possible break glass in case of an invented election emergency. Make It Make Sense is brought to you by Telos RX. This time of year, we're all getting back into a new routine. Maybe you've got kids heading back to school. Work starts to pick up with the fall around the corner, and maybe you've been thinking about getting into a new health routine too, but going to a doctor can be a hassle, especially if you're looking to lose weight and you've been running into walls. The cost, the wait list, the awkward waiting rooms. Telos RX just might be your answer. It's a telehealth platform that connects you with licensed medical providers online. You fill out an intake form, a verified licensed provider reviews your health history, and if it's right for you, they can prescribe a treatment plan. And if it's not the right fit, they'll tell you. This is a real medical evaluation, not a checkout page. Trustpilot gives Telos RX its highest rating, and they work with top-of-the-line weight loss drugs like semaglutides and tirzepatides. They even have a microdose option if you want to start small. And it's not just weight loss. They have plans for anti-aging and sexual health to help you feel your best no matter what you're going for. These are prescription medications. They're not for everyone, and they can have side effects. So talk to the provider about your history and what you can expect. There's no such thing as a magic shortcut, and anybody who tells you otherwise is selling you something. What Telos RX offers is easy access to a real provider who can tell you whether this makes sense for you. Go to telusrx.com or head to the link in the show notes. Prescriptions are required. They're only available if prescribed after consultation. Results may vary. This is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Talk to your doctor before taking any medications. I have talked before on this show about how the president could declare a national emergency around elections. I talked a lot about how I thought maybe he was going to do it during his national address last month when he released his trove of election documents that turned out to be absolutely nothing. I've written that it's been an option on the table for him for a long time, but especially after election deniers, some of whom are working for him as special employees right now, started floating a draft emergency order around the White House back in February. And not to be a boy who cried government procedural wolf here, but this week the Trump administration made some moves that are the beginnings of what you would do to declare a national emergency. First, the Postal Service mail-in ballot restriction rule went into effect, despite the fact that there's no time for states to comply, no federal framework for the rule to operate in or under, and it's not even fully finished. The USPS is maintaining that any state that doesn't comply will not have its ballot delivered to voters or have those votes returned if they've already been sent out. If you want the full description of how that's going to work, or more accurately, not work, I wrote about it this week on the Substack. It's a lot. And then yesterday, the president declared a national emergency to secure America's bulk power systems, which is a fancy way of saying big pieces of our electric grid. And crucially, in the declaration, the White House singles out critical software and digital capabilities and later mentions critical infrastructure, which things like election machines or vote counting machines are considered to be by the federal government. This declaration comes just a few weeks after suspected Iranian-linked hackers carried out cyber attacks on water treatment systems in states across the country, and the former Deputy National Director of Cybersecurity came forward this week to say, quote, hacking civilian critical infrastructure is now a constant dimension of the Iran war. I've also talked about how there have been deep cuts to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. FBI and DOJ cybercrimes teams have been retooled for immigration, and our Department of Defense cyber teams have been hobbled by Pete Hegseth's anti-woke crusade, and that's meant that we've been more vulnerable than ever when it comes to fending off cyber attacks. And that was before we entered into a war with Iran, which is considered one of the top cyber attackers on the planet. So we've got the mail-in ballot rule, the cybersecurity national emergency, and then today it was revealed that the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mullin told the White House Transparency Task Force that he and his department had found Chinese-made parts, whatever that means, in some election equipment used in some states. Mullin says this means that these machines could be compromised and could undermine the midterms. To make his case, he's leaning on a 2024 threat assessment from the intelligence community that says Russia, China, and Iran have the technical capability to access some U.S. election-related networks and systems. But Mullin leaves out the very next sentence that says we, the intelligence community, assesses foreign actors will probably refrain from disruptive attacks that seek to alter vote counts because they almost certainly would not be able to tangibly impact the outcome of the federal election without detection. This is also something I have talked about before. But U.S. intelligence agencies did not find any malicious activity from foreign actors trying to hack into elections. It's pretty much impossible unless the hackers have a direct physical line or access into every voting machine in the country. And at that point, it's just easier to do something else like send mean tweets at the president and get him to do your work for you. Still, the Department of Homeland Security is now mandating that every state prove to them that they do a hand-counted audit using paper ballots of the election if states want to get funding from Homeland Security. Remember, that's the agency that controls disaster relief. Is it illegal to hold federal funds hostage for things they're unrelated to? Probably. Are hand counts of paper ballots less accurate than the vote count machines we use? Definitely. And there's never been a proven successful attempt of a foreign attempt to alter votes on voting machines at scale. Not even at scale. It's just not a thing. There have also been a series of aggressive interactions with so-called election monitors during the primaries, including one that went viral in Minnesota where these monitors were stopping voters on their way in to go vote and then were told off by an actual election worker. And then in Wyoming, the governor there, a Republican named Mark Gordon, has asked the state's attorney general to investigate aggressive federal monitors in Wyoming. And then finally, DHS quietly announced this week that ICE arrests topped 50,000 in July, a 70% increase from the month before, as DHS is ramping up arrests and deportations and chaos heading into the final stretch of the election cycle. So what we have here is the White House lining up to say, well, our mail service is compromised, so we can't count absentee ballots. The machines we use to vote and count those votes are compromised, and the systems we use to report elections are too vulnerable. There's chaos in the streets and at the polls. These are the ingredients you'd cook up for a national emergency around an election. Now, Trump can't suspend an election even under a national emergency. National emergencies grant a president a lot of power. I'll give him that, like 130 or so special powers, but none of them say he can call off the vote. But he could disrupt it and continue to sow doubt in what will most certainly be a pretty big loss for Republicans in the midterms. There's also a really good chance that he doesn't declare an emergency either. If he sees the writing on the wall in the polling, he could just walk away from his own party and say it's not his fault to pretend their losses aren't his losses. But I'm not so sure. We were entering into a stretch of the election where the president has a desperate need to try to pull every lever he can to make it look like the game is rigged against him despite being president and his party having full control of the government. It's the only way he's ever won, by playing the victim. And what better way to do that by declaring a national emergency, claiming you're the target of those things that caused the emergency and then also the only one strong enough to stop it. Is that a good argument on paper? Not really. Has it worked before? Absolutely. The big question, though, is could it work again? And we'll just have to wait and see. But I, for one, hope we don't have to find out. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Become a paid subscriber to the Make It Make Sense Substack, where you can get access to that brand new article all about the United States Postal Service brand new mail-in ballot rule. And as always, share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Hermes on Twitter, Blue Sky, and the Say So News app, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.